Hey there, and welcome back to our channel where we delve into the most chilling and bone-chilling stories that will keep you up all night. In today's video, we bring you some of the most terrifying and true home alone horror stories that will leave you feeling spooked and haunted for days. It's an eerie feeling, being all alone in your home with nothing but your thoughts and the sounds of the night to keep you company. But what if those sounds weren't just your imagination? What if there really was something lurking in the shadows? These brave souls have experienced just that, and we bring you their harrowing tales in this video. I was home alone one night, watching TV when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. I went to check it out, but there was no one there. I brushed it off and went back to watching TV, but the noise persisted. That's when I saw a figure, standing in the corner of the room. I froze with fear and couldn't move a muscle. As I stood frozen in terror, my mind raced with thoughts of what could possibly be standing before me. Was it a person? A ghost? Something worse? I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure stood still, seemingly staring right at me with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. It was a tall and dark silhouette, with no discernible features or details. I could barely make out any shape or form in the darkness, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. As I continued to stare at the figure, my mind raced with possibilities of what to do next. Should I run? Scream for help? Call the police? I was frozen with fear and couldn't make a decision. My body felt heavy and numb, and I couldn't even take a step back. After what felt like an eternity, the figure finally started to move. It slowly began to make its way towards me, its movements deliberate and purposeful. Every step it took made my heart race faster and faster, and I was certain that my end was near. But just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into thin air. I was left alone in the room, still trembling with fear and disbelief. I couldn't explain what had just happened, but I knew that it was something that I would never forget. From that day on, I never felt completely safe in my own home. The experience had left me feeling vulnerable and exposed, and I was constantly on edge, waiting for something else to happen. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes, the scariest things can happen when we least expect them, even in the comfort of our own homes. After the figure vanished, I couldn't bring myself to move from my spot for what felt like hours. My body was shaking with fear, and my mind was racing with all sorts of thoughts and possibilities. What was that thing? Was it real or just my imagination? Was I in danger? Eventually, I gathered enough courage to move, but I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid that something else might jump out at me. I quickly made my way to the nearest light switch and turned on every light in the room, hoping that the bright illumination would chase away the darkness and whatever else might be lurking within it. As I made my way through the house, checking every room and corner, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every sound, every creak, every shadow seemed like it could be a potential threat, and my senses were on high alert. Eventually, I made it back to the living room where I had first seen the figure. I tried to rationalize what I had seen, thinking it could have been a trick of the light or my own overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew that what I had witnessed was something otherworldly, something beyond my understanding. From that day on, I was never truly able to feel completely comfortable in my own home. Every creak, every shadow, every little noise made me feel like something was there, watching me, waiting for me. I started sleeping with the lights on and always kept a phone nearby, just in case I needed to call for help. I never did see the figure again, but the memory of that night stayed with me for years. It was a constant reminder that sometimes, the scariest things can happen when we're at our most vulnerable, and that sometimes, the things that scare us the most are the things that we can't explain. Our second story takes place in an old house. The family who had just moved into the old house were thrilled to start their new life there. They had purchased the house with high hopes and aspirations for a happy life. However, their excitement quickly turned to dread as they began to notice strange occurrences happening around the house. At first, it was just little things, objects moving on their own or doors slamming shut when there was no breeze. They tried to brush it off, thinking that it was just the house settling or their imaginations running wild. But as time went on, the activity became more and more intense. They started hearing footsteps in the hallways, even when nobody was there. They would wake up in the middle of the night to find their belongings moved around the house, as if someone had been in their rooms while they slept. The family members were becoming increasingly frightened and worried about what was happening in their new home. One night, the mother was home alone when she heard a voice calling her name. She initially thought it was one of her family members who had returned home, but when she went to investigate, she found nobody there. As she turned to go back to the living room, she saw a figure standing in the shadows, a figure that wasn't human. The mother was frozen with fear as she watched the shadowy figure move towards her slowly. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. As the figure got closer, she managed to break free from her paralysis and ran out of the house as fast as she could. She never returned to the house again. After the incident, the family decided to sell the house and move away from the area. However, the house remains vacant to this day. Many people believe that the house is haunted by a malevolent spirit that preys on those who dare to enter it. To this day, the story of the haunted house still sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. According to local legends, the old house had a dark past. It was said that the previous owners of the house had all met with untimely deaths, and that their spirits still roamed the halls of the house. The rumors of the haunted house had spread throughout the town, and many people avoided the area at all costs. The family who had purchased the house were unaware of its dark history, and only found out about it after they had already moved in. As the paranormal activity in the house intensified, the family members began to experience a sense of unease and fear. They tried everything they could think of to rid the house of its dark energy, including hiring a paranormal investigator and performing a cleansing ritual, but nothing seemed to work. The night that the mother saw the shadowy figure was the final straw. After that incident, the family packed up their belongings and left the house for good. They were too scared to even spend another night there, let alone live there. After the family left, the house remained vacant. Over time, the house fell into a state of disrepair, with its windows boarded up and the lawn overgrown with weeds. Some people who dared to venture inside the house claimed to have seen strange things, like objects moving on their own or shadowy figures moving through the rooms. To this day, the old house remains a local legend, with many people believing that it is still haunted by the spirits of its previous owners. It serves as a warning to those who are thinking about buying an old house without knowing its history, that there may be more to it than meets the eye. As the years went by, the old haunted house became an object of fascination for many people. Urban legends and ghost stories continued to circulate, with each retelling adding a new twist to the tale. Some people claimed that the house was cursed, and that anyone who dared to enter it would be doomed to suffer the same fate as the previous owners. Despite its reputation, there were some who were drawn to the house, intrigued by the mystery and the possibility of encountering something supernatural. Over the years, several paranormal investigators tried to uncover the secrets of the house, conducting numerous investigations and experiments to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. However, each attempt ended in failure, as the house seemed to be shrouded in a veil of darkness that defied explanation. Some investigators claimed that they felt a malevolent presence in the house, while others reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the rooms. The old haunted house became a popular spot for thrill seekers and ghost hunters, with many daring to spend a night in the house to see if they could experience something supernatural. However, most of them left disappointed, as nothing out of the ordinary happened. Despite its eerie reputation, the old haunted house still stands today as a testament to the power of legends and the human fascination with the supernatural. It serves as a warning to those who are willing to believe in the stories of the past, that sometimes, the truth may be stranger and more terrifying than fiction. Our third story takes place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As the weekend approached, the parents of the teenage girl informed her that they would be going out of town for a few days, leaving her alone in the house. Excited at the prospect of having the house to herself, the girl invited a few of her closest friends over for a sleepover on Friday night. As the evening wore on, the girls laughed and chatted while eating pizza and watching movies. But as the night deepened, strange things began to happen. They heard footsteps upstairs, even though they knew they were the only ones in the house. The TV flickered on and off, and a door that they had left open suddenly slammed shut. At first, the girls tried to brush off these occurrences, telling each other that it was just their imagination. But as the night went on, the noises became more frequent and more ominous. They heard whispers coming from the walls, and saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. Growing increasingly frightened, the girls decided to lock themselves in one of the bedrooms and huddle together for safety. But even there, they could hear something scratching at the door, as if trying to get in. Finally, at dawn, the girls gathered the courage to leave the room and investigate the rest of the house. To their horror, they found that furniture had been moved, and there were strange markings on the walls. They also discovered a locked door that they had never noticed before, and could hear something scratching and clawing at it from the other side. Terrified, the girls quickly gathered their things and fled the house, calling the police as soon as they were outside. When the authorities arrived, they searched the house and found no sign of anyone else having been there. The parents returned from their trip to find a traumatized daughter and her friends, and the mystery of what happened that night has never been solved. As the girls huddled together in fear in the locked bedroom, they whispered to each other about what could be causing the strange noises and movements in the house. One of them suggested that it might be a ghost, while another wondered if someone had broken in and was playing a cruel prank on them. As the night wore on, the girls became increasingly paranoid and frightened. Every little sound seemed to echo through the house, and they jumped at shadows that flickered across the walls. They tried calling the parents of the girl who lived in the house, but they were out of cell range and couldn't be reached. Finally, at around 3 a.m., the girls heard a blood-curdling scream coming from somewhere in the house. It sounded like it was coming from the basement, and the girls were too scared to investigate. They could hear someone or something moving around down there, and it sounded like it was coming closer and closer to the stairs. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the noises stopped. The girls sat huddled together in the bedroom, too scared to move or speak. But then they heard a scratching sound at the door. It was faint at first, but it grew louder and more insistent. One of the girls worked up the courage to tiptoe over to the door and peek through the keyhole. She saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her from the other side. She let out a scream and ran back to the others, who were now crying and shaking with fear. It wasn't until morning that the girls felt safe enough to venture out of the bedroom and explore the rest of the house. They found that furniture had been moved around, and there were strange symbols and markings on the walls. The basement door was still locked from the outside, and when the police arrived, they had to break it down to gain access. Despite an intensive investigation, the police never found any evidence of anyone having been in the house that night. The parents returned from their trip to find their daughter and her friends traumatized and terrified, and they sold the house soon after. To this day, the girls who experienced the horrors of that night refuse to talk about what happened in that house, and the mystery of who or what was responsible for the frightening events remains unsolved. As the girls fled from the house, they were shaking with fear and crying. They ran to a nearby neighbor's house and knocked on the door, pleading for help. The neighbor called the police, who arrived on the scene within minutes. When the police searched the house, they found no sign of anyone else having been there. The doors and windows were all locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry. However, they did find strange symbols and markings on the walls, as well as furniture that had been moved around. The police also found the locked basement door that the girls had heard scratching and clawing coming from. They had to break it down to gain access, and what they found inside was even more disturbing. The walls were covered in bizarre symbols and markings, and there were strange objects strewn around the room. It was clear that someone had been using the basement for some kind of ritual or ceremony. Despite a thorough investigation, the police were unable to find any evidence of who or what had caused the frightening events in the house. The girls were interviewed several times, but they were so traumatized by what they had experienced that they could barely speak about it. After the incident, the parents of the girl who lived in the house sold it and moved away. The new owners never reported any strange occurrences, and the house remained quiet and unremarkable. However, rumors persisted in the neighborhood about the house being haunted or cursed, and many people avoided it altogether. As for the girls who experienced the horrors of that night, they never fully recovered from the trauma. They remained close friends, but they never spoke about what happened again. To this day, they still have nightmares about the strange symbols and glowing eyes they saw that night, and they all agree that they never want to be left alone in a house again.